Amy in a whisper. However, he did not respond. The videographer followed him out the front door until he was instructed to stop. Chris would later refer to it as the moment I realized I gave too much of myself to something that never cared about me, while the episode notes would subsequently refer to it as a historic moment. However, it was the culmination of a gradual unraveling that had been taking place in the background for months, or perhaps years. It was unknown to everyone, even Amy and Tammy, that Chris had been battling depression in secret. He had been bearing their load as well as his own for years. In addition to being the stable one for everyone else, he was the one who attempted to diffuse conflicts, arbitrate with the producers, continue filming when Tammy refused, and support me during her breakdowns. Even if his admirers loved him, internet trolls continued to disparage his accomplishments, make fun of his appearance, and target his physique. A man who has been taught to hold it together his entire life is particularly vulnerable to the silent erosion caused by that kind of strain. The actual breakdown, however, had begun even earlier in late 2024, when TLC allegedly approached Chris with a spin-off idea that focused on his risk of relapse rather than his success. They wanted to follow him to mental health sessions, diet consultations, doctor's appointments, and even his home life when he was under stress. They wanted vulnerability on demand, so they requested if they could video him weighing himself once a week to give the audience suspense. Chris declined. However, producers never enjoyed hearing the word no. Tension grew. They allegedly started putting pressure on his wife to show up more frequently. They requested to capture intimate moments with his parents on camera. They wanted him to bring fans back to the show by confronting Tammy about her actions. Everything culminated on the morning of his breakdown, which no one had the complete details of until now. Before filming began that morning, Chris got a call that completely upended his mood. Ratings weren't the point. It has nothing to do with contracts. It has to do with his health. He had undergone testing, following months of feelings strange, exhausted, and breathless. The news he never wanted to hear was revealed by the call that came in while he was getting ready to film at Tammy's house. Physicians had discovered issues from his prior bariatric surgery and needed urgent monitoring to stop additional harm. He had yet to inform anyone. Nevertheless, he came to shoot. Then, without any prior notice, the producers forced him into a sequence that was emotionally charged. When Tatum broke, he turned to leave. However, the effects continued after that. Actually, it was just the start of a terrible and disorderly disintegration that pulled the whole family into an unexpected quagmire. TLC execs were in a frenzy following Chris's departure. Millions of dollars had already been spent on the upcoming season, and significant plot points were centered on him. After months of rehabilitation, Tammy's health had stabilized, and Amy's plot had moved away from significant drama. They lacked a compelling storyline to keep people interested in the show without Chris. They attempted to compel him to return, which was the own action that would make everything worse. They arrived to his home. They gave his manager a call. They made a larger offer. They also attempted to instill guilt by saying things like, "Do it for your sisters. Do it for the fans' end. Don't ruin the season." Chris declined. Producers were ordered to leave by his wife, who supported him. The deception, however, started when TLC started to put pressure on Amy and Tammy instead. They implied that without Chris, shooting contracts might be renegotiated and not in the family's favor, and said he was putting the whole show at risk. Tammy, already struggling with her own problems, lost it. Amy, caught in the midst, attempted to remain impartial, but even she said she wasn't sure how to manage the aftermath after she allegedly called Chris and accused him of ruining everything they worked for. Family dinner ceased. There was silence in the group talks. Chris refused to be controlled at all, but everyone else went into damage control mode. However, it was what happened next that truly rocked the production. not his walkout. He recorded a lengthy, heartfelt, uncut video in which he explained why he was done with reality TV after having a private conversation with a trusted individual. In it, he discussed the weariness of the mind, the health issues, the manufacturer's manipulation, the strain Amy and Tammy are under, the infringement of his kids' privacy, the melancholy he had concealed for some months. He sobbed. On the broadcast, he made admissions he had never made before. He described his feelings as being like a character stuck in Summer Nielsen's story. Chris believed that his trusty friend would never betray him. Thus, the video was meant to remain between them. However, in the realm of reality TV, nothing remains hidden for very long, and betrayal is a creepy thing. In a matter of days, a production assistant managed to obtain a leaked audio snippet, but not the entire video. It then subtly made its way through the team to a post-production person, and amazingly, to a junior editor who wasn't even tasked with the family's plot. Everything detonated at that point. Chris was accosted by producers who demanded to know why he had recorded an attack on the show. They talked to him as though he had already released the clip, which caught him off guard. He wouldn't say sorry. He wouldn't elaborate. His wife threatened to call the sheriff if they didn't vacate their property right away. However, it was too late. Panic swept inside TLC as word traveled like wildfire among the network's inner circles. They were more terrified of losing control of the story than they were of losing Chris. What if the entire video was released? What if viewers found out what actually happened behind the cameras? If people were aware of the threats, manipulation, health scares, and mental breakdowns, the backlash would kill the show. At that point, the situation became increasingly dire and gloomy. The network apparently targeted the members of the Slaton family who were most susceptible to coercion, rather than retreating. Tammy was the first one they spoke to. She was already struggling with emotional exhaustion after leaving rehab, so she wasn't prepared for another public feud. However, TLC viewed her as leverage. If she persuaded Chris to come back, they allegedly offered her a bonus storyline that would include more screen time, higher compensation, and potentially a solo feature. Tammy was aware that it was manipulation, masquerading as care, even though they presented it as an opportunity. However, she was also a little upset at Chris's abrupt departure. The fact that he left her and Amy to handle the consequences, and the possibility that his choice might cost them momentum, contracts, and money. A part of her, therefore, believed the producers when they whispered that Chris was being selfish. In early February 2025, she called him, her voice trembling with panic and anger. "You believe that you are the only person who is worn out." I said. She said, "You believe that they only use you. All of us have experienced it, but we have persevered." Chris didn't reply with a shout. He didn't dispute. "I didn't quit, Tam." He simply said, "I got away." She ended the call. Amy attempted to mediate a few days later, but she was also conflicted. Her personal life was already chaotic. Once more, there were rumors of marital issues. She supposedly felt pressed by TLC to revisit old wounds regarding her ex, postpartum difficulties, and stress eating. She needed the money even though she didn't want to do it. The producers became even more demanding when Chris left. She called him one night and sobbed. She said, "You chose the right moment to save yourself. However, you chose the worst moment for us." He was more deeply hurt by that sentence than by anything TLC had ever said, because Amy felt wounded, not furious. At that point, Chris made a choice that even his closest friends and family were horrified by. If leaving discreetly wasn't enough, he was going to destroy the bridge entirely. He made contact with a former TLC employee who had quit the network due to similar pressure and emotional harm, which the public had never anticipated. Messages, emails, call logs, and snippets from contracts were among the documents this person had preserved. things that might reveal what had been happening to all of them for years, not just what had occurred to Chris. Chris also showed no interest in contracts, NDAs, or court threats for the first time. He declared that he would rather become bankrupt than return. But something horrible happened at home that almost put a halt to everything while he was getting ready to reveal the truth on his own terms. His wife discovered him slouched in a living room chair, hardly responding on a calm evening in late February. He breathed shallowly. He had a pallid face. He was sweating profusely. She believed he was suffering from a heart attack. In a matter of minutes, the ambulance arrived. Hospital examinations revealed that it wasn't a heart attack, but rather a serious side effect linked to his prior surgery and fatigue from stress. The doctor warned him simply that he might die the next time if he didn't slow down. Everything inside of him was cemented in that moment. The hospital bed, the machinery, the terror in his wife's eyes. After stealing his tranquility and almost taking over his thoughts, the show now posed a threat to his life. He would not return. However, TLC was planning while he was recuperating. They were aware that they couldn't legally eject him, but they could ruin his reputation before he ruined theirs. In an attempt to undermine Chris's credibility before he could speak, they be changing. And I hate that for you. I've got to do something because these boys deserve better, and you deserve better too. I guess I was trying to hold on so tight because we didn't have a dad. It's hard, I know this hurts. Believe me, my heart is crushed for you and for these babies. I don't think I'm strong enough to do it, Amy whispered.